Oh boy, do I have a doozy for you tonight, you guys. So this piece of advice came in the middle of one of my support groups. We had a discussion about it, and as soon as the support group ended, I knew I had to make an episode of common pieces of marriage advice that are probably healthy for good relationships, but super damaging for someone who's in an unhealthy one. So today's piece of advice is the marriage triangle. Have you seen this? You've seen this. I'm sure you have. I turned it sideways because it makes more sense for my brain to have it sideways, but lots of people also see it like this, right? Where you're moving up. I turned it sideways because I didn't like the idea of one's higher and one's lower. Let's have equal ground. So this is what I did. I moved it sideways. This diagram, the idea behind it, the marriage advice that comes behind it is, if you're having a hard time in your marriage, all you need to do is prioritize God in your life. And if you turn to God, if you center yourself on Him, if you connect with Him and the Holy Spirit, then as you move closer toward God, you will also be moving closer to your spouse. See how, let's see if I can see how, as these two move toward God, the lines end up closer together. So as you're moving toward God, you're moving toward your spouse, and that will help solve the distance. Here's where the problem is. Well, first, it's probably super helpful for a healthy marriage if both members of the marriage say, okay, let's adapt this into our lives, let's center on Christ, let's both focus there and move toward Him, then yeah, it's probably going to be healthy and they'll probably grow closer together. I can see that being a thing. What I usually see is we have spouse number one who is having a really hard time personally, and spouse number two who is trying really hard to be the very best spouse that they can be and taking all of the information that they're getting and actively applying it in their life. So they're starting on equal ground here. But if spouse one stalls out, or if spouse one says, you know what, this is too hard, I don't want to do this, and turns around and walks the other direction, while spouse two says, okay, I'm going to grow closer to my God, and that will help me grow closer to my spouse. But what actually ends up happening, if you look, if only one spouse is moving on this line while the other spouse holds still, they're not growing closer together. It's actually a greater distance, and especially if spouse one isn't just stalled. If spouse one has actively reverted to maybe old habits or old behaviors, or is actively walking in the direction, that distance is going to grow and grow and grow. And so spouse two then finds a place where they're feeling spiritually well. They've taken care of their spiritual self-care. So they're feeling peace. They're feeling calm. They're feeling maybe some hope. Not all the time, but as you take care of yourself spiritually, you begin to have these things in your life. So they're feeling those things, but what they aren't feeling is more connected with their spouse, which was the goal of what they were doing anyway. And so they think, oh, I'm doing it wrong, I gotta try again. But really what's happening is that only one person is doing the work. And so one person is going to find that safety, and one person will have that, but the marriage isn't going to feel closer. And what's damaging about this information is if someone goes into spiritual self-care believing that that's going to lead them to be closer to their spouse who is not doing any spiritual self-care, they end up with this kind of internal battle, because they can choose to continue on the spiritual self-care path, where they have found the boundaries, they've found the peace, they have some happiness, and they're finding some safety in these things, but they don't have the connection with their spouse that they were hoping for. Or they can also revert back. They can also revert back and be a little bit closer to their spouse and have that connection a little bit, because now their expectations are different, or now their boundaries are gone, or so they'll feel like they have that connection because they're back in a closer space, but they've lost the safety that comes with following all of the boundaries that come with centering their life on God. And so they have this battle. I'm seeking closeness with my spouse, and I was doing that by drawing closer to God, but I didn't get that. So now what should I do? So that is that piece of advice. If you find yourself in this situation, please reach out. Please don't think that you are alone or the only one who has felt it. I was going to share the best advice that I ever received when I was in that space, but I don't think it's appropriate to share it right here. So if you need some help, reach out. I would love to chat with you. I'd love to share our stories and see what we have in common and what we have individually to bring. If you have any pieces of advice that were super damaging for your unhealthy relationship, share them with me. Let's talk about them. And don't forget to watch my other series on, right now we're talking about boundaries. And stay tuned. We'll chat soon.